Okay, I'm going to call to order here, and we're going to start off first with a roll call. Hopefully this microphone's on. I've got it right here. So starting on my right.
Thank you. Luz Molina Lopez.
Michael Savoy.
Jose Campos.
Deirdre Robinson.
George Familette.
Mark Silverman.
Nancy Corrigan.
Carola Nicholson.
Mary Gion.
Carrie Ann Farrell-Hines.
Dan Jacobson.
Sochi Leon.
Trina Salazar.
Alicia Berha.
Okay, we have a quorum, and so we will start off. Just one remark, just a reminder on the microphones. It was definitely hard in the back to hear. I'll do my best, but everybody else.
Turn yours on. There you go.
And as I pop on and off mine, so be mindful of that.
And when the power went down, it affected the microphone, so we're manually monitoring those right now, and then after the lunch hour, they should be back up and working properly.
Okay, let's proceed into the agenda. Agenda item 1A provides members with information regarding opportunities to participate on committees with the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants, or the AICPA. The AICPA announced that those interested in serving on a committee for the 2020 to 21 volunteer year should complete the online committee interest application no later than October 1st, 2019. An overview of the AICPA volunteer environment is provided as an attachment. To ensure that staff tracks CBA members' interests, please email Rebecca Reed, CBA Board Relations Analyst, when you submit an application, and provide the committee you are seeking appointment to. If you have any questions regarding the AICPA committees, please contact Rebecca Reed with any questions. Any other comments? Okay. We are going to go to the next agenda item, 1B. And we're going to have Rebecca Reed discuss changes to California Board of Accountancy 2019 meeting location.
Hi. Agenda item 1B provides members with a proposed change to the September and November 2019 CBA meeting locations. Staff were able to secure a CBA meeting location at California State Polytech, or Cal Poly Pomona, for the September 26, 27, 2019 CBA meeting. Since the September 2019 CBA meeting is scheduled to take place in Sacramento, California, and the November 2019 CBA meeting is scheduled to take place in Southern California, staff are requesting to change the September 2019 meeting location to Cal Poly Pomona and the November 2019 meeting location to Sacramento, California. The change will retain the same number of CBA meetings scheduled in Northern and Southern California locations, and the CBA may choose to make a motion to change the September and November 2019 CBA locations. And at this time, I'd like to turn it back over to President Familette, and would be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you.
I move that we amend the meeting locations as suggested by staff.
Second.
I second.
Okay. Comments? Board members? Comments from the public? Okay, let's have a vote.
Alicia Berhel?
Yes.
Jose Campos?
Yes.
Nancy Corrigan?
Yes.
George Familette?
Yes.
Mary Gion?
Yes.
Carrie Ann Farrell-Hines?
Yes.
Dan Jacobson?
Yes.
Sochi Leon?
Yes.
Luz Molina Lopez?
Yes.
Carola Nicholson?
Yes.
Deirdre Robinson?
Yes.
Katrina Salazar?
Yes.
Michael Savoy?
Yes.
And Mark Silverman.
Yes.
Okay, motion passes. Okay, we're going to then proceed to item agenda 1C. We're going to have Mr. Dominic Franzella discuss revisions to Chapter 3 of the Peer Review Oversight Handbook.
Good morning and thank you. Before I begin, I believe in your hand, Carrie, there was a revised attachment 10 to this item specific to the letter that's under consideration. It's so it'll replace the attachment 10 you have in your current materials. It was brought to my attention there was a couple of typographical errors that we wished to address prior to the board's approval of it, or should the board approve it. So moving to the actual materials, this agenda item is providing the board an opportunity to provide comments to the Aicpa and NASBA related to the oversight, or Chapter 3 of the Aicpa's Oversight Handbook. Staff are requesting that the CBA approve the attached letter in your materials, so attachment 10. Members may recall at the last meeting I brought the handbook for members' consideration. There was a request from NASBA to provide input on the proposed changes, and at my request the board deferred making any comments until the peer review oversight committee had an opportunity to review and evaluate the handbook and its impact. The PROC met at the beginning of the month on May 3rd, and as luck would have it, the Aicpa also met on May 3rd and reissued Chapter 3 of the handbook again with some additional edits. So the PROC actually evaluated the one that I brought to the committee or to this board in March. There were some changes made to it since that time and are under consideration by the Aicpa. They're asking for feedback and comment on that. They haven't provided a specific date. Staff have had an opportunity to evaluate it and believe that our comments are still substantively similar even after the changes that the Aicpa is proposing since its May 3rd release at its peer review board. Ultimately, our concerns and the PROC's concerns were not manifestation of the actual changes that are being proposed. It's simply just the characterization of peer review as a whole within the Oversight Handbook. It's incredibly apparent that the Aicpa obviously has an interest in maintaining confidentiality and conflict of interest as it relates to their bylaws, but oftentimes, or in some instances, these bylaws could contradict or be in conflict with state law, or maybe the board's organizational structure or how it functions and performs peer review oversight activities. And with peer review now becoming, I believe it's required by all states. There may be one or two that don't require peer review, but now that it's been thrust into the regulatory environment, I believe NASBA, other state boards, staff, and the PROC are recommending that the Aicpa look more maybe holistically at how it's discussing peer review in a regulatory environment, even though it did originate as a membership organization, educational environment, but has now been threaded into the framework of most regulatory schemes for the for boards of accountancy. So in attachment 10, staff have provided its proposed recommendation to the board for its consideration. And again, some of the thrust is, again, not the actual changes that are being proposed within the Chapter 3 of the Oversight Handbook, but more conceptual, with some of it being more recognizing more of the regulatory environment in general, recognizing that state boards of accountancy may have rules and laws that provide guidance on conflict of interest and how those need to be handled by regulators, and that in some instances the state boards of accountancy should be are probably the best positioned and most qualified for selecting which staff members are going to be the liaisons and part of the process in the oversight capacity. For example, this board, the PROC is within the enforcement division. Its staff members are staffed by the enforcement division, and in some ways, while we meet the spirit of Chapter 3 within the Oversight Handbook, we do conflict in as much as the enforcement division is part and parcel to the overall oversight. And we believe that's appropriate. It's at the board's discretion to make those decisions, and at least the handbook should give that level of consideration. So with that, I turn it back over to members, and I'll do my best to answer any questions that members may have.
Questions from any of the members?
George, she's...
Yes. Yes.
I think my only question is the the summary of the points on the second page, the language in the final bullet uses the word may want to reconsider because of sort of the description you've just made, where our staff could be considered not conforming with Chapter 3, maybe the letter of it, even though in spirit we do conform. Is there a reason we chose such soft language as may want to reconsider? Because if we could be taken to be in conflict with this, what was the thought process not using something like the word should reconsider?
Honestly, I didn't even give that a level of consideration. I have no issue making it more assertive. If that's the board's direction, I'm happy to change any mays to shoulds. And I think it's appropriate here, at least in light of when it can be perceived as a conflict, yet this board perceives the process working effectively and efficiently, and it may, again, with the letter be in conflict, but in spirit does conform to more or less what the AICPA is looking for. So I don't have any issue with it saying AICPA should reconsider that position.
Any further questions? Okay. Well,
I move that we approve the draft letter. Do you need a motion for this, I assume?
Yeah.
That we move the attached draft letter with Ms. Salazar's edit.
Second.
okay, we have a second. Any other comments from board members? Comments from the public? Okay, let's have a vote.
Mark Silverman,
Yes.
Michael Savoy.
Yes.
Katrina Salazar,
Yes.
Deirdre Robinson,
Yes.
Corolla Nicholson,
Yes.
Luz Molina Lopez,
Yes.
Soshi Leon,
Yes.
Dan Jacobson,
Yes.
Carrie Ann Farrell Hines,
Yes.
Mary Jion,
Yes.
George Pamela,
Yes.
Nancy Corrigan,
Yes.
Jose Campos,
Yes.
and Alicia Burhow.
Yes.
Okay, motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Franzella. So moving on then to item 1D, I think this is going to be our presentation on the big screen with the Office of Professional Examination Services. Hopefully our power will stay through this presentation. We're going to have Tracy Montez, Chief Division of the Program and Policy, and Heidi Linser, Chief Office Professional Examination Services. Thank you.
Push the button.
Yeah, you may need to push them at the bottom. Yeah, get the green light. Perfect. And be close.
Good morning. Okay, so we are here from the Office of Professional Examination Services. Our office provides professional consulting services to DCA's boards, bureaus, and committees related to their examinations. We make recommendations based on regulations, professional guidelines, and technical standards related to licensure examinations. Can you guys hear me okay? We really appreciate the opportunity to speak to you today. We're looking forward to working with you in the future on your occupational analysis and national review of hopefully in 2020. And we haven't worked with your board before. That's why we're really excited to be talking to you. And so just give you some more background on OPES and our work with all the other entities in DCA. We're currently working with 23 DCA clients. They're listed here, boards, bureaus, committees, and some external clients. For some clients, we develop their state-based examinations. And other clients who have national examinations, such as yourself, then we conduct occupational analysis and we review their national exams. And some clients have state-based and national exams, and so we do all of that work for them.
And I'll jump into, we function much like an internal consulting firm for the Department of Consumer Affairs. So rather than our programs having to go out and contract with larger testing companies that charge lots and lots of money, we can do and provide these services at the same quality, if not better, at a much more cost-effective mechanism. So again, with these clients here that you see, we do everything from just some general consultation to full-blown exam development, exam administration, and so forth. I'd also like to add, too, under the external, I've also done work with California State Bar. Again, many of the individuals there recognize the work that we do here at DCA and the standards that we follow, so I've actually provided some consulting work for them on behalf of our department with their examinations. So thank you.
So you had some information in your packet about Business and Professions Code Section 139. And so BMP Code 139 has a lot of requirements related to examination validation. One of the requirements is that boards need to conduct an occupational analysis for each of their examinations every 5 to 7 years. And the boards submit a report every year indicating the status of occupational analysis and examination development. And this is because the legislature believes that occupational analysis is a fundamental aspect of licensing. BMP 139 also mandates that all national exams must be reviewed in accordance with policy guidelines that are set by OPES. We also have listed here some principles for the validation use of personnel selection procedures and standards for educational and psychological testing. These are our guidelines, testing standards, principles that legally determine what we need to do to make sure licensing exams are legally defensible. In general, in order to develop a valid test, you're going to keep hearing me say the same thing, occupational analysis. So the first thing you need to do is a detailed description of what you're trying to measure, and that's what an occupational analysis is. So our standards and guidelines, in addition to 139, all require an occupational analysis, which is a study of the profession and a detailed description of what the practitioners do. And in addition, that study needs to be used to develop the test. So the test content has to mirror the job content that people are doing in the field. And most importantly, actively practicing licensees need to assist with these projects. We don't do this in a vacuum. We have actively licensed practitioners serve as subject matter experts, or we call them SMEs, and they must be included in every step of the process.
And again, let me jump in. Even though Business and Professions Code Section 139 is California-based, the other standards that are listed there are national. And so what we advocate is not something unique to Consumer Affairs or California. They are standards and guidelines that are followed across the country. So if you're developing a firefighter's exam in New York or a clerical exam in Kansas, whether it's selection or regulation, these are the standards that are followed. And those are what the courts look at if they are having to defend a case with regard to whether or not an exam is job-related. And again, the California legislature found that these standards were so important back in about 1999 that they put forth BNP Code Section 139.
Okay, so taking a look at the big picture, the purpose of licensing and DCA's mission, as you all know, is to protect the public. And the purpose of licensure examinations related to that mission is to identify those practitioners who can practice safely and competently from those who cannot. So if you look at this graphic here, the goal is to distinguish who are the green people from the yellow people. We want to know who goes in the safe side of the slide and who goes in the unsafe. So licensure exams need to be developed to provide a valid and reliable method for doing this. And to be fair, when we're making decisions about who is legally allowed to practice, we must focus on entry-level tasks and knowledge that are important for public protection. We can't test people on things that they have learned, they may have learned after 10 years of licensure. We need to get to that level of entry-level competence, and that's what the difficulty is of our job. So when we develop examinations at OPES and other entities who develop examinations, the mission is to ensure that examinations protect consumers while not limiting access to occupations. And, we're all discussing recently not having barriers to licensure. So the issue is getting to that sweet spot of not having a barrier, but also protecting the public. It's a balance between those two goals. So we find that balance by ensuring that we focus on entry-level tasks and knowledge that are critical for public protection.
And again, this is why you will often hear us talk about the value of having psychometricians or testing specialists involved, as well as licensees as our subject matter experts and our board, because these three entities provide the defensibility to ensure that we get to that sweet spot, as Heidi mentioned. Again, protecting the public, but not creating artificial barriers to licensure.
So in order to determine what the critical tasks and knowledge are, as I said, then we conduct an occupational analysis. So the occupational analysis defines practice in terms of the most important tasks that new licensees must be able to perform safely and competently, and the essential knowledge that they need to perform those tasks. It's the first step in the cycle of examination development that we follow, and all national exams would most likely follow a very similar outline. So the result, you can see the steps there on the wheel. It starts with the occupational analysis. The results of the occupational analysis give us an examination outline, which tells us how many questions we're going to ask on the different areas of practice and what weight each one has, and which ones are more important than others. And following that, we would have item writing, which is writing test questions, reviewing test questions, constructing exams, and then setting the passing score for those exams. So this is a cycle for all licensure examination development.
We could go into a lot of detail on each of those, but again, we know that we're just giving you an overall summary, so please know we recognize we're going kind of quickly through this, but the key thing here is that it's ongoing. Okay, many people think there's one exam, there's one accountancy exam. No, that's not true. There's a bank of test questions, you're constantly writing new questions, assessing what's going on in the profession, making sure that you aren't testing overexposure, keeping a defensible exam. So we really try and reinforce how it's an ongoing cycle.
So as we talked, the occupational analysis should be performed every 5 to 7 years. This is to make sure that we stay abreast of changes in the profession. As you can see in this graphic, remember what cell phones used to look like just only a few years back. So I'm sure in your profession things have changed, and that's why standards and guidelines recommend an occupational analysis every 5 to 7 years. We need to make sure that the description of practice stays current so that the exam stays current with what's happening in the profession. So, in addition to providing a detailed description of practice and providing the foundation for the examination, the occupational analysis results also provide qualitative and quantitative data that's useful for other purposes. So once we have a detailed description of practice, it can be used to evaluate licensure requirements to ensure they're congruent with entry-level competencies. It can be used to look at training and curriculum requirements. And it can improve transparency by providing specific exam information that candidates need to know in order to be licensed.
And again, I want to emphasize this is a very important slide. We know that most of our programs at DCA recognize the description of current practice and how it links to the exam. We're really now trying to work with them to look at the basis for legislation and policy and other areas with regard to, say, continuing education and so forth. We've heard a lot of talk about the Little Hoover Commission, artificial barriers to licensure, and so forth. We know that there is a direction to really look at what the programs our regulatory boards have established for minimum requirements to become licensed, and so we're working with many programs to tie that back to the occupational analysis results to help again support that evidence. I also heard a discussion earlier about candidates or students being able to take the examination prior to finishing their curriculum. That's a good discussion to involve the occupational analysis too. So I may talk to Patty about that afterwards because I heard some really good comments and considerations. And so I think that can be valuable too in your decision making.
So the actual steps of the occupational analysis are here. We start with researching the profession and talking to subject matter experts who are licensed practitioners, talking to them on the telephone, trying to get a description of the basic areas of their job. Then we develop task and knowledge statements. We conduct workshops with subject matter experts who have a diverse background, different work settings, different practice types, and to make sure that we're covering the entire breadth of the profession. We then develop a survey instrument that's sent out to a large sample of the profession, asking them to review the tasks and rate them on how often they perform the tasks, how important are these tasks to your work, and they review the knowledge and answer how important is this knowledge to performing this task. And this all ends up being data and evidence to support the content validity of the examination. So we had experts write and develop the task statements. We have experts review and rate them. So it's a confirmation that, yes, these things are done in the profession, and yes, they are important. So that validates that the exam is testing the proper things. And another group of SMEs reviews the final results of the survey and determines the weights of the examination outline, how many test questions are devoted to each area of the examination.
And again, there's a methodology with each of these. So whenever the subject matter experts are working with a testing specialist, there's a methodology on how the process unfolds. They're trained on the things that they need to do and how to use their expertise to achieve those specific goals of each of those meetings or workshops that we have. And again, that's so that we have an examination that is entry level, because we know that often if we're hiring individuals in certain settings, we tend to hire the stars, those that are the best. But with licensing, we're not necessarily looking to license the best. We're looking to license those who meet those entry level standards. Again, based upon what is safe and competent practice for each profession.
So as I mentioned, the SMEs, the subject matter experts, are critical to the process, and the use of SMEs is required by psychometric standards. So OPS, when we start your project, will work with the board on how to select representative SMEs, and SMEs need to reflect the profession in terms of specialty areas, type of practice, location, ethnicity, and gender, and they should have a valid license in good standing. The right group of SMEs ensures that all areas of practice are represented, includes individuals licensed 5 years or less to provide a focus, as Tracy said, on entry-level practice. And then OPS facilitates the workshops to make sure that psychometric standards are met. So back to Business and Professions Code, Section 139. Let's talk about national examinations in particular. So Business BMP 139 requires, as I said, that all national examinations need to be reviewed in accordance with OPS's validation policy. And in a nutshell, it says these three things: that national exams must meet psychometric and legal standards, California practitioners must be represented, and that means that California practitioners must have been involved in the occupational analysis that was done for the national examination. And the examination must be reviewed for California content, meaning the exam needs to cover the bulk of information that is relevant to California practitioners. So I'm going to talk a little more about these steps. So for us, for OPS, our review of national examinations has three parts. First, we conduct a psychometric evaluation. Second, we conduct a workshop with SMEs to compare the national occupational analysis results to the California occupational analysis results. And finally, we identify the extent to which the national examination reflects California practice, and we make recommendations. A little more detail. This is what's involved in the psychometric evaluation. So during that, the review, we look at the occupational analysis methodology. There's many ways to do an occupational analysis, and we make sure that the method used is an accepted method and includes all the important aspects that standards and guidelines recommend. We review the examination development procedures. We review how the passing score is set. We review how the examination is scored, what the passing rate is. We also review test administration and security procedures. We review information that is given to candidates to make sure it's a user-friendly process for candidates to sign up and schedule for the test, and also make sure that ADA accommodations are followed in accordance with the law. So, national examinations, by definition, test aspects of practice that apply to all states. So when they do their occupational analysis, they should have a group of people representing all states, and if there are areas of practice that vary across states, those aren't going to be covered, because it wouldn't be fair to test someone in Alabama on California laws. So by definition, typically things that are not the same in every state are not covered on a national examination. In California, however, many occupations have California-specific aspects of practice. Most commonly, we have laws and ethics that are California-specific. So those aren't going to be covered on a national examination. So for licensure examination to be valid, the goal is to measure the full scope of practice in California. So we're trying to get to that full practice, that full puzzle piece. So that's why we need to do a California occupational analysis first. We then use the results of that to compare to the national occupational analysis and look for any areas that are not covered. So we usually end up with results that look like one of these three diagrams. So if the national examination assesses most of California practice, as shown in the first diagram, there's a lot of overlap, then we would recommend a law examination or a law and ethics examination in addition to the national, just to cover those things that weren't covered that were California specific. If the results end up looking like the second diagram, so the national examination assesses only a portion of California practice, but there is a lot of other practice that is not covered on the national, then we could recommend a California specific or supplemental examination that is more than just laws and regs. And finally, if the results look like the final diagram, the national examination assesses a very small portion of California practice, then we would recommend just a California state-specific examination, and those are the ones that we do at OPES. Tracy can give you some examples of those.
Yes, I was just going to say, and this again is a good example of why it's important to do that occupational analysis every 5 to 7 years, because you will see that things will change over time. For example, there was a point in time with the Board of Psychology. They used the Epp national examination. They did their occupational and found out that it was more of the middle situation, that example, where there were some real critical practice pieces missing from the national exam. So they did the law exam and then a California specific. Over time, though, those differences diminished, and now what they have is essentially the first example. There's the Epp, and they just have a California law or jurisprudence exam that they use. Acupuncture had a state-specific exam. They've been working over the years to use the national. They have just looked at, we did look at the occupational analysis and have found that the national has expanded their scope, their range, so they're looking now at going towards more of a national exam with California law. So again, things evolve over time, and so it's important. You know, we don't expect to see significant gaps when you've been using a national exam, but it's good to do your due diligence and have that on record. So again, things evolve. Same thing with that cycle, always ongoing.
Another thing that happens is other states' scope of practice changes over time. So sometimes national exams do expand what they're covering, and sometimes the law and ethics might become national, and so that it's possible that the national exam could cover your law and ethics if we do a thorough review. Sometimes we find that as well.
Thank you. If you have any questions.
Yeah, any questions from other board members?
Regarding testing environments, there's been a lot of press about the environment that's created for students to take tests. obviously, it's regarding college admissions tests, but does your office have a overarching position on creating environments that are inclusive and take into account students' learning differences?
Well, if I understood the question correctly, our office does have a master contract with a vendor, and we have computer-based testing sites. And those sites do have to meet rigorous security conditions, as well as providing any kind of accommodation under the American Disabilities Act, so that if students have certain situations where they may need additional time, or if there are some language challenges, different things like that, they can follow that. There's a process where they would request that. It's a difficult situation sometimes with our boards because, again, the mission is consumer protection regulation, but we also know that we have a very diverse population in California, and depending upon the schools and their training and situations, we want to create a level playing field for them when they take their exams. So I know sometimes anxiety comes up, things like that, learning disabilities, language, again. There are protocols that can be followed to ensure that there's a level playing field. Does that answer your question?
It does.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And if I may too, even the occupational analysis information in California, we really do try to make as much of that as transparent as possible. So many of our regulatory boards will publish the exam plans online. Again, none of that should be a secret. The only thing that you really protect are exam questions, test questions. But everything about how an exam is developed, how the passing score is established, what you're tested on, that's fair. That's important for students to know and schools to know.
Okay.
If the national occupational analysis included a sufficient representation of California, the SMEs used, would then your office rely on that, or would you still at a state level engage SMEs and go through that process?
Well, we still have to, yes, audit or review the national exam process. So we would be looking to see if they have involved California subject matter experts and whether or not they were sampled and so forth. But as sort of, we consider ourselves an objective independent body of the national, so we would look at that, yes.
But we still would need to do the California occupational analysis in order to sort of define what is California practice and then do that comparison to the national. So both things have to be done. They have to use California practitioners. However, as I said, let's say there's things that are only done in some states and not all states. Those would not have been covered on the national, and we wouldn't know that without doing our California specific OA.
And once you do this full-blown study, the next time in 5 to 7 years, you could do maybe what we call a modified approach, where it's more of a focus group coming in and saying, hey, this was done 5 years ago. What's it look like now? If there hasn't been significant changes, that's great. If there have, then you may want to do some more data collection. But because we don't have one on record, it's really important to do the full methodology, the full survey.
So
Question?
building off of that, I guess I'm concluding that we've never done one with OPES or an external agency. Is that correct?
I believe that's correct.
Yeah, we don't have one on file. You may have done one in the 90s under our predecessor, but we don't have a current one.
But how many of these boards or bureaus are like us? I mean, we're dealing with a very unique test that tests 55 jurisdictions on exactly the same test. So, you know, NASBA, AICPA, they integrate to make sure the test is fair and comprehensive. But I'm not sure any of that test involves California-specific anything. So, you know, your job may be very easy in terms of what we're going, you know, looking at. The only thing specific to us is an ethics exam that we give. very specific to California. So
Well, that's what's getting at the what's specific to California. I think that's what's trying to bridge the gap there, but I'm confused, all right? I mean, if we're saying this has to be done every 5 to 7 years, and it hasn't, at least in the tenure that I've been here, then how have we been satisfying ourselves, and what is it we're trying to solve for here?
Well, you're trying to create evidence of validation. So in the event you were ever challenged, you would have that document. And I have had to do that with some of our boards before. We've also had to defend our work for the Little Hoover Commission. So it's not uncommon. The medical board was challenged on their passing score probably about 7 years ago. So every now and then, one of our regulatory boards is challenged. And so our job is to work with programs and say, this hasn't been done in a while. You know, yes, more than likely, you know, the national exam is solid. They're doing what they should be doing. But let's have that report on file, that evidence that shows that. And if there's nothing California specific, then that makes our job very easy. But again, it's a very interesting process, and things evolve, and it's important for California, as we see it, to lead other states in terms of good testing policies. I'm going to give you another example with the Board of Psychology. They use the EPPP. There is some interest in using what's called the EPPP2 exam. The National Association has decided that, well, we need a different exam. We need 1 and 2. So we're working with the state board. This is all public. It's been in meetings to question that. And we have essentially halted the use of this as a mandate because we see this as an additional burden to candidates. And so my point of sharing this with you is that California is often seen as a leader on regulatory issues and testing. And so it's good for your board to do your due diligence, have the occupational analysis, have the review of the national. In the event that there are some changes or challenges in the future, you have that. And you can also report that in any sunset hearings because they do look at that from time to time.
So I was trying to understand the purpose of the agenda item. Are we here for education and just overview? Is this already a done deal in terms of path that we're on? Because I just feel like we have incomplete information, meaning we go to annual or regional NASBA meetings. We sit in and understand what the AICPA and NASBA are doing, but obviously we don't have that information here from an overall board. And I have certain views on the uniformity of that exam and why that's the most appropriate thing to have in the accounting profession, but just confused as to what the outcome of today's agenda point is.
So the purpose of having the presentation today was just to share the process that will be utilized and then to give members an opportunity, if you have questions or concerns, to voice those so that we can get the answers to those questions and then bring that back. It also was intended to provide sort of a transparent introduction of this because I know that there is national interest in understanding what this process will be. And so stakeholders are observing today's presentation as well so that if there are questions or concerns that they might have, that we can work with the department to get the answers for them as well.
I want to give another perspective to you also about national exams. I've been in the field for a long time and seen a transition in the quality of national exams, and we think it's partly because they know that we are going to be reviewing them at some point. So there's a lot of players in the testing industry, and they are the vendors who are out there. They are running a private business, and we hope that they are following testing standards and guidelines, and that's why we evaluate them, and most of them are, but sometimes you find things that you don't want to find. And there's also been scandals with national examinations. And so we want to just make sure that they know they're going to be reviewed and have to answer to making sure they follow standards.
And I do want to point out several of our clients here use national exams, and we've done this process for them. So again, this isn't something unique. We're actually going to be doing the medical board exams in a couple years. We're scheduled to do those.
Okay. Yeah.
What initiated this presentation? Was it from a stakeholder, the DCA, asking, bodies to do this occasionally? Like, what initiated the presentation today?
It's Business and Professions Code Section 139. That's what our department is mandated to do. Every year we report to the legislature. We have a mandated reporting where we compile all of this information, and it's provided in our actual Department of Consumer Affairs annual report, and it shows the boards where they are with their occupational analysis and exam programs. And your board has been on our list to reach out to, and so we were very fortunate to have some time. We don't have a huge staff, so we have to sort of stagger our clients, and so we had an opportunity and reached out to your board to say, it's time, we need to do this for 139.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yes.
Thank you. My question is, are we able, maybe, I'm not sure if this is a Patty question or for both of you, but what you're describing, there is also, you may be aware, a process at the national level with the national practice evaluation that happens. I can't speak to when that's happening, although we are due again for another national evaluation. So my question is, are you able, since the timing sounds maybe flexible because this isn't, we aren't exactly at a 5-year mark necessarily, to tailor the timing of this process so that the results are the most beneficial? I would hate for you to complete it just as we're starting a new analysis and for that to lead to results that our exam needs to be updated when in fact it's a timing issue. So I think that would be, as a board member, my request is that we have Patty work with your department just to make sure that it's effective in terms of timing.
Right, and we have done that before where a national program is getting ready to do their occupational analysis. We may start California's. We also may start having conversations. So it's like, hey, you're getting ready to survey, for your occupational analysis. Please make sure you have California involved. So yeah, timing can be extremely helpful.
Thank you.
Okay. And because we do have folks listening from the national, I want to emphasize too, our office does not look at test questions or exam questions. We'll ask for some samples, but that's not part of the data that we review. That's usually the biggest concern that the national program has, is we're going to take their item bank and security issues. We're not interested in that. We're looking more at processes and how do they actually implement certain processes.
I'm just building off the question on timing. Is this a 6 to 12 month process, 6 to 24 months?
It's about 9 months to a year for the occupational analysis, and then 6 months for the national review.
And a lot of that depends upon how long it takes to negotiate any confidentiality agreement and how involved subject matter experts are to the extent that they participate in the process. And again, that give and take of communication. That's sort of the longest time frame. Usually we like to do it a bit sooner. And I will say too that your licensees, well, with all of our other clients, they really enjoy being involved in this process. It's an opportunity for them to contribute to the profession, to say they've been involved. They also do a lot of networking when we have them at the various meetings, so it's usually a very positive experience.
Okay.
I have a couple of questions.
Sure.
After the report is issued, what kind of guidance, what are we going to learn from this report?
Well, you're going to have a description of practice of what your licensees do, and You're also going to have a document that defends your use of the national exam. And in the survey, there is an opportunity to ask any other demographic type questions. Sometimes boards say, we really wish we knew how many people were doing X, and we can also ask some questions like that as a survey of your practitioners. Those are the things. A lot of professions have, turf wars, I don't know if you do, of other practitioners, and it really helps to have a complete description of what one occupation does when you're looking at another similar occupation, just if you had to make decisions about who is legally allowed to do X, that can help.
Pat, did you have a comment?
And then I might just, as far as timing as well, point out that we did include in the materials, there is a fiscal impact. And we do pay for the occupational analysis. That's on page 2 of your agenda item. So timing-wise, we will need to take proactive steps to make sure we have that budgeted. Presently, we do not have in our budget a line item for the occupational analysis.
Any other additional questions? Okay, well, thank you so much for your presentation.
Thank
We
you for your
appreciate that.
time.
It was a very good educational background on that process. Thank you very much. Our next item, 1E, I do not believe we have an update on, so we're going to proceed past that and go to item 1F. And we are going to have Ms. Karen Nelson is going to provide us an update from the Office of Board and Bureau Services.
Good morning. I think it's still good morning. I have a few seconds, but I'll say good afternoon because it'll be in between. President Pamela, Vice President Silverman, Executive Officer Bowers, and board members. Karen Nelson, Assistant Deputy Director with Office of Board and Bureau Services at the Department of Consumer Affairs. Thank you again for always allowing us an opportunity to provide a brief update on current department activities. So with that, I want to just start off with, as many of you are aware, Director Dean Garfilo had left his post as DCA's director on April 19th. He has been a mentor and friend to many of us at the department, and we wish him well as he starts his new career. We are working with the governor's office and identifying a successor, and our executive team looks forward to working with the governor's office to ensure a smooth transition as we prepare for new leadership at the department. The department still plans to hold a director's quarterly meeting this June 3rd, 2019, and will be led and hosted by our Chief Deputy Director, Christopher Schultz. With regard to the executive officer's salary study, as previously reported, the department had retained KH Consulting to conduct this executive officer salary study, and the study aims to provide an in-depth analysis of the programmatic and operational complexities of our boards, as well as a comparison of salaries from other states. The project was expected to take approximately 6 months with an estimated completion date of March 2019. There's been a slight delay in that completion due to some challenges receiving responses from various states. And that is a critical component of our survey, making sure that we have comparative data with other states. And so we do hope to release the final document in the next couple of weeks or so. We do appreciate the board's patience as we work toward finalizing this project. And as soon as we have released the study, we will convene our executive officers as well as board leadership to go over the final report and have an overview of it. We will also plan to do one-on-one meetings with each of our programs, knowing that some of the details in the report will be specific to each of our programs. With regard to technology and our open data portal, I do believe I've shared with you before that in January, the Office of Information Services launched the open data portal, which is a publicly accessible one-stop shop for licensing statistics and information, where the public can look at trends and changes in licensing data going back about 2 fiscal years. And in April, they actually announced the incorporation of enforcement and application data into this portal. So our office is specifically excited about this addition to the website and an addition tool and resource to the public. If you go to the DCA website, look for the data tab, and you can click on that and you can choose CBA, for example. It will show licensing data as well as trends, and so what we hope is that this tool will not only be a resource to the public, but also to our boards where they can extract those data components and put it in meeting materials. As I know you always have some charts and things that may be helpful to you all. And if you have any questions about the data portal, please contact Sean O'Connor, which is Chief of our Information Services, Project Delivery, and Administrative Services. And the last thing I wanted to share is our Future Leadership Development Program. As I have shared with you all in the past, this is a program that helps some of our up-and-coming emerging leaders to become executive officers or bureau chiefs with the department. And later this month, this year's cohort, consisting of 8 individuals, will be graduating and celebrating this accomplishment. And over the past 8 months, they have been developed by mentors, exposed to pertinent qualities and characteristics of executive leadership, completed and presented their team projects, which directly impact DCA as a whole, and networked with various stakeholders, including some members of the legislature. And that concludes the department update at this time. As always, thank you all for your hard work and your commitment to this board. And I'm happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Okay, any questions from the board? Okay, well, thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
Appreciate it very much. Moving on to agenda item 2, report of the Vice President. We have no appointments. So we are going to move on to item 3, agenda item 3, and have the report of our treasurer, Ms. Corrigan.
Thank you. Yes. So what I'm going to provide to you this morning is our fiscal month 8 financial report, which is February 28th, 2019, and then an update on 2017-18. And following that, we'll have a presentation from our Assistant Executive Officer, Deanne Pierce, regarding the CBA's fund condition and possible fee changes. As you recall from our March meeting, we directed further analysis and for staff to come back with additional information to us for us to consider, and we'll do that at the end of it, following my report. So as far as the 17-18, the prior year's financial statements, the information we have is still preliminary. There are still issues with the transition to the fiscal accounting software. I believe it's getting closer. We have a memo from the DCA's office to expect something after June 30th, so hopefully we will. At our next meeting, we should have information with the 10-month, which would be April. So things are tending to move right along. CBA staff are working very closely with the DCA budget office in trying to help this along and at least, maintain and provide information to us. So if you want to go ahead and turn to page 2 of my report, and I'm in the 5th column from the left, you can see that our expenditures are $9.4 million approximately. That's 65%. If I took a straight line 8/12, that would be 67, and we're pretty much neck and neck with straight line. We know that no world is perfect, and so we're going to have fluctuations up and down, but as best as possible, this information has been provided. Right now, we are anticipating a surplus for the year, $49,500. My last report sheet was more like 20,000. So again, as the information becomes more accurate and reliable, we'll kind of see where we get the end of the year. The enforcement expenditures have been adjusted
as much as possible based on anticipated future costs. That is a big piece of our pie and a tough one to judge depending on what happens. So that's kind of an ongoing process. I don't know if you have any specific questions on page 2, but the costs are kind of moving along as would be expected. And so if I continue on to page 4, always kind of interesting, we can see our licensing, our administrative, executive, and then our enforcement pieces of the pie, all very, very important to what we do as far as consumer protection. The pie is allocated based on the number of staff assigned to each division, and enforcement typically, as it does and continues to do, takes the biggest piece of that. So at 43% of the total. So moving along to the fund condition statement on page 5, and one that we'll work on more when Ms. Pierce gives her presentation. Again, remembering that 2017 and 18 are still preliminary, as are what we have for 18 and 19 and the 8 months. So for 17-18, our months in reserve are 21.6 months, and to date, or through February, I should say, they are 15.7. The legislature, of course, recommends the 24 months, which is what, you know, the hurdle that we're trying to work with and determine how best to get there. So that should come along, and we should have more information as we progress, hopefully after that June 30th date. The governor's office information was provided and issued May 9th. There's nothing that affected our budget at this time and going forward, and I don't know if there's anything. I know your report, Patty, mentioned if there was anything else we'd be informed, but as far as I know, there are no changes for us at this point. So everything that we know and our staff knows has been incorporated into the information that I'm providing to you. And I wonder at this time if there are any questions for me. And if not, Mr. President, I'd like to move on to Ms. Pierce's presentation.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. So the purpose of this agenda item is to provide the California Board of Accountancy with additional information to identify possible fee changes that produce sufficient revenues to more closely align with expenditures and build its accountancy fund, which I'll refer to as reserve. Before I get started, I want to make sure that members have the hand carry item that was included in your folders. It was printed on yellow paper just to make it easily identifiable. So I'm going to discuss these additional items shortly as I move through my presentation. During the March meeting, I provided an overview of the CBA's historical fee levels, past actions on fee changes, and an update on recent projections for the CBA's fund condition. So I was not planning to discuss this information again unless members have any specific questions on the background contained in the agenda item. Okay. So let me move on. So as members may recall, at the March meeting, the CBA directed staff to provide a more comprehensive review of all the CBA's fees and provide further proposals beyond increases to the CBA's license renewal and initial license. This agenda item, as you probably identified, has many options for CBA consideration. However, based on information that we received late Tuesday from the legislature, there are some changes to the options included in this agenda item, which I will talk about, but I want to touch base on just a few other agenda items first that I think will help your deliberations. First, starting on the bottom of page 3 and included as attachment 2, I've provided information regarding the structure of the CBA's budget and spending authority. As members are aware, the CBA has little flexibility in its discretionary spending. Although we have proposed ideas for reducing yearly expenditures, the effect on the budget would be minimal and the impact on operations could be significant. Next, as we plan for future operational needs, we must consider possible budget augmentations. Staff have identified areas where reserve funds will need to be accessed to fund specified activities, and these areas include information technology,
credit card acceptance, examination validation, and enforcement. Potential funding amounts have been identified for most of these areas, but these are only preliminary estimates. And because they are only preliminary, none of the estimates have been included in the fund condition scenarios that are included in this agenda item. Another impact to CBA revenues could occur based on legislative direction. As part of the current legislative session, there are 2 bills the CBA is monitoring that would impact revenues, and those are AB 544 and AB 613. AB 544, if enacted into law, would limit the amount of fees the CBA could collect for those renewing in an inactive status and those renewing a license that has accrued renewal fees. These changes would reduce the CBA's revenue by approximately $950,000 per year. Assembly Bill 613, on the other hand, provides an additional pathway to increase CBA fees that would be outside of the current rulemaking process. This bill proposes to authorize each board within DCA to increase fees every 4 years, any fee authorized to be imposed by that board by an amount not to exceed the increase in the California Consumer Price Index for the preceding 4 years. It is difficult to provide an estimate on this revenue as it would be based on several factors, but this proposal would build and not reduce CBA revenue. Moving on to page 7 of the agenda item, I have identified that a fee analysis will need to be completed to increase future fees via regulation. The analysis would be completed by an outside vendor, and DCA has indicated that this process could take a minimum of 4 to 6 months and may cost a minimum of $40,000 to $50,000. The fee analysis will be used to ensure that the fee being proposed for a specified service does not exceed the cost of performing the service. Attachment 3 contains an older fee analysis that was conducted internally in 2015. The analysis is reflective of the average cost it takes to process a renewal application, including each staff person involved, the classification of staff, and time. The outcome of the fee analysis would be submitted to the Office of Administrative Law should the CBA initiate a proposed rulemaking to change fee levels. Last, at the March meeting, the CBA requested that increases in CBA fees other than license renewal and initial licensure be presented for consideration. Regulatory fee increases cannot exceed the statutory limit. Identified on page 8 of the agenda item are the fee categories, the statutory limit, and the current level of each fee. As some fees are already at their statutory maximum, staff focused on the fees for firm applications, first-time examination, repeat examination, retired status license, and retired status restoration. As staff conducted its review on those fees, it concluded that the repeat examination application and the retired status restoration fees should not be considered for a fee increase. For the repeat examination fees, the workload would likely not support a cost beyond the current level of $50. And further, for the retired status restoration, these are received infrequently and would have very minimal impact on the CBA's revenue. So before I provide an overview of the options for fee increases, I just wanted to check and make sure, see if any members had any questions before I move on. No? Okay. So as previously mentioned, late on Tuesday, we received additional information from the legislature regarding the CBA's statutory fee levels for license renewal and initial licensure. Mr. Bone mentioned this when he was giving his legislative report with regards to the Sunset Bill. The legislature has indicated that they believe the CBA would benefit from having a minimum fee level set in statute, an amount between $250 and $280. The statutory maximum they are comfortable with is $350, which is, of course, different from the $500 the board initially approved as part of its sunset report. The rationale is that a minimum fee level amount between $250 and $280 would enable the CBA to begin collecting the increased revenue sooner than a regulatory change and would allow us time to complete the fee analysis. The results of the fee analysis may indicate that the CBA needs higher fee levels, and if so, the CBA would either pursue a regulatory change to increase fees, or we would go back to the legislature for an additional statutory limit increase to an amount greater than $350 if the fee analysis indicates this is necessary. So the hand carry items I referenced earlier, which are on yellow paper, include an attachment 14, which identifies two minimum fee levels, one at $250 and another at $280, that would take effect on January 1, 2020. As I mentioned, the legislature supports a minimum of $250, but there's some flexibility that they may support a fee level as high as $280, which is why we're providing both scenarios in attachment 14. So with this new information, there are options that are included in the paper that are no longer viable. So I will provide an overview of each of the options identified, and I'll identify those that would not fit with this new information. So I'm going to focus on pages 10 through 14 of the agenda item. Option 1, which is described on page 10 and has fund projection information on attachment 4, proposes a combination of an emergency rulemaking and a regular rulemaking and focuses only on license renewal and initial licensure fees. If the CBA places a minimum fee level in statute, an emergency regulation would not be necessary as the effective date would be the same, which is January 1, 2020. Moving to option 2, which starts at the bottom of page 10 and continues through page 13, has associated fund condition information included on attachments 5 through 8. This option is responsive to the board's request that we explore changes to other fees beyond license renewal and initial licensure. Each attachment, numbers 5 to 8, contain 3 scenarios. The first scenario includes a 2-step fee level increase for license renewal and initial licensure only, and scenarios 2 and 3 on each attachment include an increase to license renewal and initial licensure and increases in other CBA-related fees, including a first-time examination application, the firm application fee, and the retired status license fee. With the new information received from the legislature, attachments 7 and 8 are no longer feasible as the license renewal amounts offered would exceed the proposed statutory maximum of $350 that the legislature has indicated they support. Moving to option 3, which is on the bottom of page 13, and the associated fund condition information is included as attachment 9, this option proposes a significant one-time fee increase for one renewal cycle, followed by a reduced fee for future renewal cycles. This option is no longer feasible. As I previously mentioned, the proposed amount of $500 for one renewal cycle would exceed the proposed statutory maximum of $350 that the legislature has indicated they support. And option 4 is identified on page 14. This option proposes to establish a minimum license renewal and initial license fee in statute. And when the agenda item was being developed, we had identified different fee levels for consideration. Based on the new information received from the legislature, none of the proposed fee levels on attachment 10 are supported, and attachment 14 now reflects the range of fee amounts that the legislature is supportive of placing in statute as the minimum fee level. And under the recommendation in the agenda item, staff had included various options for CBA consideration. However, based on the new information discussed today, staff is now recommending the following as a possible motion: that the CBA directs staff to work with the legislature to identify a statutory minimum fee level ranging between $250 and $280 and a statutory maximum of $350. Further, the CBA approve a change to Business and Professions Code section 5134F that reflects a minimum fee level between $250 and $280 and a statutory maximum of $350. And with that concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions that members may have.
Alicia?
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Pierce. When is the legislature's timeline? Do you know about this minimum, maximum standard?
In terms of folding it into the bill?
Correct.
So it's my understanding that they have indicated they will be folding it into the bill into a bill when it goes over to the Senate side.
Okay.
So the effective date, once signed by the governor, would be effective January 1, 2020.
Okay, so we need to make a decision on this in July? Worst case scenario, or do we need to make a decision on this today?
I would say we would need to make a decision on it
Despite
today.
not knowing what's going on with the legislature?
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Jacobson?
If I may, I don't understand. Is this a spot bill or something like that? Because everything should already be through the committees in the House of Origins.
So I'm going to invite Mr. Bone up to the table so he can
Thank
kind of
you.
talk about the legislative side. It's my understanding that this is going to be folded in with the language from our sunset bill. So if the board should approve this language, it would be included in the sunset with the other sunset provisions that we talked about previously. And yeah, so.
In short, Ms. Pierce is correct. That they've indicated the bill, in fact, the bill 1521 just got out of the Assembly Appropriations Suspense file this morning, pleased to report. Then it will go to the Assembly floor for approval by the end of this month, and then over to the Senate. And so once it moves to the Senate is when they have indicated they would amend the bill to include these fee provisions that are being discussed.
Thank you.
Ms. Salza?
So it seems that attachment 14, this new proposal, is a timely solution to the financial concerns. But looking at the month-end reserve out to 2024, 25, the final year in the analysis, it doesn't get us to the months-end reserve that we need. So would we, if we approve this or consider a motion, are we also then expecting at some point in time in the near future to be revisiting the fees when the fee analysis is done and then looking at that maximum? Because my question is, we put forward 500 and now it's 350, and what work might be associated if we needed to try to increase that in the future?
And during our meeting in April, it was conveyed that, or in our information we received late Tuesday, is that the $350, it is lower obviously than the 500, but once we got through our fee analysis, that the results of that would give us information in terms of whether or not we needed to have a further increase in our fees, not just a license renewal and initial licensure. But if it supported an increase above 350, then they would be open to us coming back to them to change the statutory amount to a higher level.
Thank you.
Yes, Dan.
You made a comment about cutting certain things, and there's a list of 4 or 5 of them in there, including having almost all meetings here in Sacramento. Did your comment about those about there not being a material decrease in costs apply to those things?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
So I appreciate it having attachment number 3 to, showing our internal evaluation of our costs associated with, per licensee with doing business. And I think that it's providing the support that we need to show that the amounts that we're charging are not adequate to support the services of the agency and of the accountancy board, and threatens to undermine our mission to protect the public, to protect the consumers. We're not able to fully fund all of our our functioning, then we can't fulfill that mission. So if we were to approve the recommended fee proposal from attachment 14, then as part of that process, would we then also need to authorize funds to conduct a objective external fee analysis like attachment 3 that we then would use to support a request for additional fees?
We wouldn't necessarily need board authors, I mean, we wouldn't have to have a motion specific to conducting the fee analysis. That's something that we've actually already started preparing work for to establish a contract. So doesn't necessarily need to be part of the motion to do that.
Okay. So that's already automatically in the works?
Yes.
And, okay. So, and I will also mention that in the attachment 14, although we don't get to the 24 months in reserve, it does, this recommended fee increase does get us, move us in a, positive and respectable direction, even though we're still falling short of the 24 months. But then it's, we have then the support for requesting the additional, fee increase. So.
So yes, I agree. Attachment 3 is very helpful. It was completed in 2015, and the cost per renewal, et cetera, was $258. So we're already above that $250, the bottom range of the $250 to $280. I'm hoping we can go for the $280. Yeah. And costs are always increasing, but that was, 4 years ago, so.
Ms. Leon?
Just a quick point of clarification. The recommendations are for individual and firm fees, not just individual, right?
So the recommendation would be, yes, to include the renewal fee for firms and individuals.
Thank you.
Is that the extent of the fees that are covered by this? I mean, because you said minimum fees of $250, but what's it specific to? And like if you look at page 8 of all the different kinds of fees, I assume that, so that doesn't include first-time exams or exam type fees. It's just initial licensure and renewal?
Yes.
For firms or individuals?
Yes.
But not delinquent biannual renewals?
Well, the delinquency fee is linked to the renewal fee. It's 50%, so it would automatically increase as well. As well as the initial licensure.
But not to 250. It's at that for that one. It's at 50%.
Yeah.
And that's different than the inactive licensure fee that was in one of the legislative committees.
Yes.
Okay. Well, I guess we need a motion.
Yeah.
I would move. So this would get incorporated into. So we just have to approve. And it sounds like we've got agreement that is going to be supportable. So I would move that we pursue the legislative option of incorporating this into our sunset bill with a minimum fee of $250 to $280, I guess subject to finalization there, and a new statutory limit of $350.
I second that.
Okay. Comments from the board? Comments from the public?
I'm sorry, actually. So we'll have a report at the July meeting as to, progress and about any developments, I'm sure.
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
Okay. Call for a vote?
Alicia Burhell? Yes. Jose Campos?
Yes.
Nancy Corrigan?
Yes.
George Familet?
Yeah.
Mary Jiang?
Yes.
Carrie Ann Farrell-Hines?
Yes.
Dan Jacobson?
Yes.
Soshi Leon?
Yes.
Luz Molina Lopez?
Yes.
Corolla Nicholson?
Yes.
Deirdre Robinson?
Yes.
Katrina Salazar?
Yes.
Michael Savoy?
Yes.
And Mark Silverman?
Yes.
Okay. Motion passes.
I got a related question.
Bring it.
Once we have leadership acknowledgement.
Yeah, we're going to try to just knock out agenda item 5 because I think we have some.
Can we stay on this topic for a second, just on fees?
Sure.
So that took care of the main fee item. We had talked about other fees and options that we had for that. And frankly, I still have an interest in adjusting those fees separate from the legislative process, because that's not what was offered to us in that regard. That would have to go through a regulatory, but I forget the ones. You had, I guess, under option 2, scenarios 2 and 3, you had sort of a variety of things. If we take scenario 3, that's on page 11, for example, and obviously the license renewal, we talked about that. Firm application fees, that automatically is going to $250 if should this legislative proposal be successful.
The application fee is different.
Okay.
So there's a
And so the initial exam and the retired status license fee, those are also different? So those 3 bullets there, you had focused on those as ones that would have avenues within current statutory limits to adjust. And they don't have the same effect as the initial and renewal license fees, but they would have an effect.
Yeah.
And I don't know how the rest of the board feels, but given that we haven't adjusted these in some time, I would propose making an adjustment to those fees.
Mm-hmm.
And we would have to follow a regulatory process for that, right?
Yeah, I agree with Mr. Campos that we need to continue working in that regard.
Is there a preference among the board with respect to scenarios 2 and 3 in terms of the degree of the adjustment? I think I'm supportive of scenario 3, but I'm fine with scenario 2 or some combination thereof.
Mr. Campos, could I clarify just on part of that? Is that something that you wanted to occur after we get the results of the fee analysis back? Because I believe the fee analysis would encompass those other processes, those other fees as well. So I didn't know if you wanted to perhaps consider waiting until we got that back, so that could be a part of the package that we submit to the Office of Administrative Law.
She is so good at teaching. Yeah. Absolutely, we could wait for the fee analysis, but I would definitely bring that back okay, good.
As soon as we get those results back, we'll schedule it for a board agenda and go from there.
Okay, that would be good.
Thank you, Mr. Campos.
Okay, real quick, agenda item 5, we have the Enforcement Advisory Committee report. Mr. Rosenbaum.
Yes, good afternoon. The report of the Enforcement Advisory Committee. We held our last meeting on May the 2nd in Anaheim. At that meeting, our members reviewed 23 closed case files, and we held 5 investigative hearings. Our next meeting will be held on July 11 in Los Angeles. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Thank you.
Great, thank you. We do not have a report on the Qualifications Committee. Item agenda 5C, the Peer Review Oversight Committee. Mr. DeLizer is going to give us a quick report.
My report will be quick too. The PROC held its meeting on May 3rd here in Sacramento. And our committee would like to thank Ms. Salazar for coming and presenting an overview of the CBA meeting from March. The members of the committee reported on the various oversight activities that had taken place since our last meeting. And we also spent some time discussing and providing feedback regarding that revisions to the Oversight Handbook that Dominic spoke about this morning in the President's report. We also reviewed the AICPA's National Peer Review Committee oversight, as well as the AICPA's Oversight Task Force, their visit to the California Society of CPAs, which administers most of the peer reviews here in California. And they got a clean report on that. Our next PROC meeting will be in August on the 16th here at the CBA offices. And that concludes my report. Are there any
Okay. Mr. Franzella, did you want to finish up the update?
Yeah, item 5C2 was a hand carry that we put in your materials. We received a response at taking a step back at the last meeting, the board talked about the peer reviewer population. The board authorized the submission of a letter and requested a response back at the end of last month. We got the response back yesterday. And so we wanted to distribute in advance to give members an opportunity to at least see that we got the response. We've done no assessment of it. Haven't had the opportunity to really look at it whatsoever. It's attachment 2 to the materials we gave you. The anticipation is at this point, staff will come back, look at it, and make a determination with board leadership on whether or not to place it on the next board agenda or wait till after the August meeting of the PROC and kind of go from there. So I'm done.
Seems responsive. I mean, there seems to be at least a good rapport with the national groups on getting further information.
Well, thank you very much. We do have a time certain return at 1:30, so please keep that in mind. We do have a petition, so if you could please be back and ready to go at 1:30, we would appreciate it. Thank you. Order and establish a quorum through roll call. Starting on my right.
Michael Savoy.
Jose Campos.
Deirdre Robinson.
Luz Molina Lopez.
George Familette.
Mark Silverman.
Nancy Corrigan.
Carola Nicholson.
Mary Gion. Carrie Ann Farrell Hines.
Dan Jacobson.
Sochi Leon.
Katrina Salazar.
Alicia Burhow.
Okay, we have quorum. I will turn things over to Administrative Judge to proceed.
Good afternoon, everyone. Can everyone hear me? All right, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. Before we go on the record, I'm just going to explain the process a little bit. Once I call the case, then I will ask the board members to identify themselves, starting on my far right. I'll indicate that we've established a quorum off the record. I'll then ask the Deputy Attorney General to identify himself, followed by the petitioner. Once we begin with the actual substance of the hearing, the Deputy Attorney General will go first. He'll present the case just as an orientation, not to relitigate the facts, but just to establish why we're here today. Once he's done, then the petitioner will have an opportunity to present his case, at which point then the Deputy Attorney General will have a chance to cross-examine him, followed by any questions from the board. Mr. Turnbull, any questions before we begin?
No.
Do you have any documents that you intend to introduce as evidence here today other than what's in the petition packet?
Excuse me, sorry. I was trying to turn my phone off.
Do you have any documents that you intend to introduce as
No.
evidence here today
No.
other than what's in the petition packet?
There is no documents.
Okay. All right. All right. We can go on the record. Mark, are you ready? All right.
Perhaps when the people, when somebody speaks, that I can't see a name tag here, if they could say your name before you speak, please. And your tags are kind of small over here for me to read. If you could just say your name before you comment or question, I appreciate it. Thank you, guys.
All right. Okay. We can go on the record. All right. We're on the record before the Board of Accountancy to review the petition for early termination of probation of petitioner James Michael Turnbull, OAH case number 2019-040026. My name is Sean Gavin. I'm the administrative law judge assigned to hear this case. Can the board members identify themselves for the record, starting on my far right?
Michael Savoy.
Jose Campos.
Deirdre Robinson.
Luz Molina Lopez.
George Familette.
Mark Silverman.
Nancy Corrigan.
Carola Nicholson.
Mary Gion. Carrie Ann Farrell Hines.
Dan Jacobson.
Sochi Leon.
Katrina Salazar.
Alicia Burhow.
Prior to going on the record, we established that a quorum is present. Can I take the appearance of the party, starting with the Deputy Attorney General?
Yes, good afternoon, Your Honor, and members of the board. Supervising Deputy Attorney General Carl Sani, appearing on behalf of the Attorney General under Business and Professions Code, Section 5115.
And the petitioner is here present representing himself. Mr. Turnbull, before the hearing, off the record, I explained the procedures that we're going to follow. The Deputy Attorney General is going to go first. After that, I'll have you make a presentation of your case. Deputy Attorney General will have a chance to question you, followed by questions from the board. Any questions from you before we begin?
None.
All right, Mr. Sonny, when you're ready.
Again, we have had an off-the-record conversation, Mr. Turnbull and I, beforehand. And just as a preliminary matter, Mr. Turnbull, would you like to go forward today or withdraw your petition and bring it at a later date?
I wish to withdraw and bring it back at a later date.
Okay.
Bring it back into what?
At a later date.
All right, so if you'd like to withdraw the petition, then it'll be considered withdrawn, and there won't be a presentation today.
Yes.
Is there anything else you'd like to add for the record?
I can, I don't think it's, Mr. Turnbull wants to prepare some additional work product and additional information that he wants to bring to the attention of the board members at a future meeting, and he does not have that material before us today, and therefore wants to withdraw it and bring it at a later date. Is that accurate, Mr. Turnbull?
Yes.
Okay. All right, well, the matter is withdrawn.
Okay.
Very good. Did the board members have any questions before we go off the record? Hearing none, we are off the record.
Okay, let's establish a quorum through a roll call. So on my right?
No, how many times?
We'll do it again just for the hell of it.
We're getting practice today. Apparently.
Michael Savoy.
Say my name. Jose Campos.
Deirdre Robinson.
George Familette.
Mark Silverman.
Nancy Corrigan.
Carola Nicholson.
Mary Gion.
Carrie Ann Pearlman.
Dan Jacobson.
Sochi Leon.
Katrina Salazar.
The Alicia Burhow.
The.
One name, Alicia.
The one and only.
Okay, we're gonna skip to item 8, and then we're going to come back for one of the items we missed this morning. So we're going to start with the report of the Enforcement Chief, Mr. Franzella.
Thank you, and good afternoon, members. So item 8A is the Enforcement Activity Report. It's as of March 31st, 2019, so it represents 9 months of data. So just looking at the first page, the CBA has received just over 2,300 complaints through the first 9 months of the fiscal year, which represents a 38% increase compared to the same period last year. Moving on to investigations, which is on pages 3 through 5 of your materials. The CBA has seen a slight decrease in the average days to close its investigation since the last report, from 136 to 126. Further, when compared to the close of last fiscal year, which sat at 201, we've seen a 37% decrease in the average days to close. Staff have closed just over 2,800 cases so far this year, with 79% completed in the first 6 months and 92% completed within a year. On page 4 of your materials, the enforcement has 656 cases pending investigations inventory. Again, I think this is a very good marker. At one point, as you can see, at the end of last fiscal year, we were at over 1,100 cases. So we've really been working to manage that inventory. There are 29 cases as of this report that were over 24 months, which is down slightly from the last report, which was at 36. We reran the numbers at the end of last month, and presently we have 14 cases over 24 months. So it's a far cry from when we were at 117 or so, 140, I believe, at one point last fiscal year. Moving on to discipline, which is on pages 6 to 9 of your report. Looking first at the AG referrals, the CBA has referred 57 matters to the AG this year, and we have filed 54 pleadings, with the vast majority being accusations. On page 7, the CBA has 69 matters pending at the AG's office, with 4 over 24 months. One is a case that's been in the court system since 2012. Another took effect last month. One case is receiving assistance from the AG's office, and one of them will be taken up this afternoon as part of your closed session. Moving on to citations and fine, which is on page 10 of your materials. As I've been reporting on, there's, again, just been a sharp increase in the number of citations issued. Through the first 9 months, we're at 409 citations, with 73% of those being related to the violation of the minimum yearly C requirement of 20 and 12. Moving on to page 11, which this is the second time we've brought this forward as part of the year. And there's a new section related to unlicensed activities. During the first 9 months of this fiscal year, the CBA has had 249 complaints of unlicensed activity. We presently have 125 investigations pending, which is about just over 35% decrease since the last report. To date, we've issued 23 citations, closed 285 matters, and referred 3 matters to a district attorney or local law enforcement. The final area I'll touch on is probation monitoring, which is on pages 12 and 13. We currently have 168 individuals on probation. We are all up to date on our orientations. We held another round at the EAC meeting earlier this month, and have done some telephonic ones as well. We have had 34 probation violations, the vast majority being cost reimbursement and submitting quarterly reports. Those tend to go hand in hand, as most people pay their costs at the time they're submitting their quarterly reports. That concludes my report, and I'll turn the discussion back over to President Familette and be happy to answer any questions members may have.
I had one question you mentioned on the citations, the 409, in terms of the 2012 requirement. So what happens, and they pay their fine, and are they given a certain amount of time to come into compliance with the requirement, or how does that work?
There's really no way to come in compliance. It's probably one of the few, if only, that we don't order correction, because you either do it or you don't.
Okay.
But they're given 30 days to file, or to either file an appeal or to pay the citation. And if they don't pay the citation, that carries over into their next renewal, and it would prohibit them from being able to renew without rectifying that citation.
Okay. I mean, the only other thing, I guess, suggestion, if we've seen a bump like that, maybe consider in our newsletter or whatever, just sort of highlighting reminders or asking people to double check those things, just so that they inadvertently don't get themselves into problems with it.
I believe, actually, if I recall right, either we've done it or we're about to send a letter to a number of the providers, CE providers, to kind of help them or help us
Yes.
push the message as well. And I believe I looked at that letter that Ms. Pierce's team put together last week sometime.
Okay. Questions? Yes.
Can we speak a little bit more to the 38% increase year over year in complaints? Are there any particular category of complaints? I was looking at the pie charts to see if there were meaningful differences in the share between 2017, 2018 to this year. And
So I would say the two drivers right now that I can speak to are 20 and 12. Last year, the board made a policy decision to no longer have those handled within the renewal unit at a request of staff, because the requirement had been around for going on a decade. And so first time identified used to be handled over there. Now they're handled in the enforcement division and determine whether or not a citation should be issued. And then the Aicpa has been more diligent in sending information to us related to firms who were dropped or terminated from peer review. We used to get that sporadically, maybe once a quarter. Now we get it every month. And so the peer review related one, I think even last year we ended at 425. We already have 432 through the first 9 months. So that's a potential driver as well. I'm not concerned about it, as you can see, at least from where we were last year at close of last fiscal year at 1,100 cases to be at 652. I'm not overly concerned about the increase in the number of cases coming into the division.
I ask because, I mean, that's over a double-digit growth year over year, and trying to see if there's anything we can do to mitigate. But it sounds like this is part of some of the decision process that we made as a board.
I would say until individuals start rectifying the 20 and 12 requirement, we'll continue to see at least maybe this being the baseline going forward, because that is just going to continue to be a driver as long as individuals continue to not address that.
Thank you.
Other questions from the board? Yes.
I had a couple of comments. It seems like that 20-hour, first year renewal requirement is a big one. Is there a way that they could submit those hours after the first year?
No, it's do it or don't. You have to complete it in that first year, or we never see it happen in the second year. We're
Right,
always see
everybody's.
It's always people completing the 20 hours. And again, even though the number of citations has gone up, if you look at that in relative to the number of complaints we get on it, it's a small fraction of the people who get the citations. It's really those who just out and out ignored the 20 and 12 requirement and didn't do any in the first year, or did 2 or 3 hours in the first year. Where we try to use education, which was part of the direction from the board, to correct it, and we continue to do so. But as Mr. Famil had asked, there's just really no corrective element after it's already occurred.
Right.
So you still may meet the 80 hours, you still may have all the ethics requirement, you still may have your ANA, and you meet all the subject matter, but there's just nothing you can do to go back in time to fix that portion of it. All we can do is either try to continue to educate you or issue the citation and hope that education. We've had people who are, I want to say, are on their fourth one. We've issued a $5,000 fine as a result of this particular issue. So there's some people who just maybe be taking it as a course of, it's just the course of doing business. They look at it as just more matter of fact. So.
And then I noticed that the renewal deficiencies are also kind of year after year a big problem. Do you think once we move to maybe submitting the units, the backup, that will be going away?
I would say the vast majority of those renewal deficiencies are the 20 and 12 requirements. So
Oh,
it has
got it.
nothing to
Okay.
really do with them submitting documentation to us. It's them not
Doing it.
doing it.
Thanks.
Okay. Any further questions?
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Consello. I guess we'll go to the item 9, the report of the licensing chief. Ms. Pierce?
This report provides 9 months of statistics for the licensing division. Just to highlight a few items, the CBA's credit card payment system is going strong. We're working to provide additional outreach on this payment option through social media to ensure licensees are aware of the ability to renew their license online. But we've received very positive feedback regarding the ability to use a credit card. Just an update on the online CPA application. We are still working on testing this new option. We had to temporarily pause on our work so we could prepare for and work with the California Military Department on our IT audit that's happening right now. We will be resuming our work shortly and anticipate implementation in the coming weeks. Moving on to workload from the licensing division, the snapshot on page 1 provides a quick overview of the volume of applications received and communications with the applicants and stakeholders. On page 2, we have included the number of examination applications that have been processed, and we are maintaining our processing timeframes at under 30 days. We have also attached the AICPA Board of Examiners meeting highlights, where on page 2 they highlight information regarding the examination candidate pipeline from a national perspective, and that's information that we're going to be providing on an ongoing basis to keep members informed regarding the changes in candidate population. And then on pages 4 and 5, information is provided regarding initial licensure for CPAs and accounting firms. And again, licensing processing timeframes are also under 30 days. And that concludes my report, and I'm happy to answer any questions that members may have.
Questions? Yes.
Just real quick, are you taking over licensing, or are we having a new licensing chief come in?
We're in the process of beginning recruitment.
Other questions from the board?
I have a question.
Sure.
Thank you. The online credit card payment system, I know that's pretty new. Have there been any complaints or any issues?
The only, I guess it was feedback or constructive criticism was with regards to the receipt that they receive after they complete the payment. They wanted some additional information on that, so I believe we're working on that, or we may have implemented it, but they just wanted some additional information regarding the payment, their name. But that's been the only negative feedback that I'm aware of. It's actually more just kind of constructive criticism.
Great, thank you.
Yes. Salazar?
I just noticed in here, and maybe I'd overlooked in the past, but I appreciated seeing the AICPA Board of Examiners meeting highlights in here. I thought that was interesting. Thank you for including it.
Okay. If there's no further questions, then we're going to skip back to agenda item 4. And the item 4A, I believe there is no report from the executive officer, so we will skip to item 4B. And Mr. Bone will give us an update on the Board of Accountancy's communication and outreach. Mr. Bone.
Excuse me. Thank you, Mr. President, members. I was excited there to jump in. It's my pleasure to provide a brief update on our recent outreach activities. Since the CBA's last meeting, we participated in 2 very successful college campus events. The first was on April 11th at CSU San Bernardino. The event featured CBA member Michael Savoy, who was our keynote speaker. along with EAC committee member Kathy Johnson, who is the past Cal CPA chair and a current faculty member there at the university. We were fortunate to be joined by Louis Sharpstone, the current Cal CPA chair, and other faculty from the university. In total, 190 students from the university and surrounding colleges and community colleges attended this event. We included a panel discussion about career opportunities and preparedness. Further, our staff provided an overview of the requirements for licensure and met one-on-one with students to review transcripts and answer individual questions. We received very positive feedback from students. I'll just share, whenever we are able to include the one-on-one transcript review with students, they're over the moon. They're very, very excited with that level of service. We held a similar event last year at the same college, which drew just over 100 students, so we're very pleased with the growth in year-over-year attendance. This event was recorded, and once prepared to be published, we plan to link it on the CBA's website. Then on May 3rd, CBA member Jose Campos and staff traveled to Saddleback Community College at the invitation of Cal CPA to speak to students about the requirements and process to sit for the CPA exam. Mr. Campos and our other distinguished guests participated in a panel discussion on career opportunities, and about 260 students attended that event.
More than 200.
I think that you counted wrong on...
My mistake.
I mean, that place looked packed.
I noticed the fire marshal outside, so... Yeah.
4 days to get there.
On April 26th, the Department of Business Oversight held their annual financial literacy fair at the state capitol. CBA staff attended that event to demonstrate our license lookup feature on our website and answer consumer questions. Looking toward the second half of 2019, staff are preparing outreach activities to be held on the campus of Cal Poly Pomona during the CBA September meeting happening later this year. Further, Cal CPA staff indicated they wish to include the CBA at future community college events that they are looking toward planning for the upcoming fall academic semester. Finally, members should look forward to an upcoming issue of the Cal CPA magazine where President Famlet will be featured on the cover in an interview of him. June or July, I think, is the time frame. So that concludes my remarks, Mr. President. I'll turn it back to you.
Any questions from members of the board? Okay, great. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Bone. We're going to go to agenda item 10 and the meeting minutes. And this will be the approval of the minutes. So would like to get a motion to adopt the minutes of the March 21, 22, 2019 Board of Accountancy meeting.
I so move.
Second.
Okay. And actually, just to, and that was all items A through F. Just to be clear on that.
Yes. Yes.
Can I request a friendly amendment to 10A on page 20183? Oh, thanks for asking. That's a clarification. If we could strike the reference to national pass rates and replace it with national number of candidates passing, and I'd be happy to provide that later, and then in the final sentence strike will and replace it with may. The general context of my comments regarding the CPA exam were related to the volume of candidates, not the actual scores, so it could be misinterpreted in the minutes.
I amend my motion to reflect
Thank
that.
Okay.
And just to be clear, then we're adopting item A and accepting items B through F.
Yes.
Correct. You are correct with that.
To accept.
I accept.
Thank you.
Okay. Any further comments from the board? Comments from a member of the public? Okay. Vote.
Mark Silverman,
Yes.
Michael Savoy,
Yes.
Katrina Salazar,
Yes.
Deirdre Robinson,
Abstain.
Corolla Nicholson,
Abstain.
Luz Molina Lopez,
Yes.
Sochi Leon,
Abstain.
Ann Jacobson,
Yes.
Carrie Ann Farrell Hines,
Yes.
Mary Jiang,
Yes.
George Pamela,
Yes.
Nancy Corrigan,
Yes.
Jose Campos,
Yes.
and Alicia Brown.
Yes.
Okay, motion passes. Thank you. We're going to now proceed to item 11 with the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants, and we're going to have Ms. Salazar give us a report on the meeting that she attended on behalf of the Board of Accountancy.
Thank you. Regarding the State Board Committee, there's no report. The next meeting will be at the end of this month, and so we'll give a report in July.
Okay.
And if you'll indulge, I'll happily move through the agenda to the next item. Okay, so on the NASBA report, B1 related to the Pacific Regional Director role, I will say that the directors are preparing for the Western Regional meeting, which will happen in Salt Lake City, and that event is June 18th through the 20th of this year. The agenda is now posted online, and some of the highlights I do think dovetail with some of the conversations we're having at this board today. There will be discussion about the CPA Evolution Task Force. And just a reminder of CPA Evolution is that was the iteration that was discussed as an alternate pathway last year. And the discussion relates to how to evolve our profession and our licensure model in today's rapidly changing technological environment. So I would anticipate that this board meeting will be rolling out guidelines for discussion and evaluation for all those members that are there and participating. There's also a 120-150 task force, and that task force was created by the NASBA chair, Janice Gray, to address the issues and the concerns and the reasons as to why we are nationally at 150-hour pre-licensure education requirement. This has come up from various states, and there's concern about why we're here, is it working, and is it producing the desired effect? So that will be a continuing conversation. And it kind of relates to some of the topics being discussed today by our CPC. The UAA, Uniform Accountancy Act Committee, that is a joint committee between AICPA and NASBA. So there will be more discussion about peer review updates. There's an open comment period to the end of June. The attest experience requirement that some of you on this board may recall, California did an evaluation of some years ago. It's now rising to a national level for consideration and analysis. And then ethics continues to be an issue. How are our laws like NOCLAR, the noncompliance with laws and regulations, impacting CPAs in the profession? So those are all some of the big issues I think that will be featured at this meeting. I would conclude my part of that presentation with saying I attended the NASBA board meeting in April. On May 13th, I represented NASBA at the Oregon Board of Accountancy meeting, and that wraps up my report on B1. On B2, the Bylaws Committee, we've held 2 more meetings, we've wrapped, and there will be a proposal to the NASBA board meeting and then to the full NASBA annual conference with revisions for consideration by all membership. And that is all I have to report. So thank you.
Okay. Any questions? Okay. Okay. Ms. Nicholson, did you have anything to
I did. Yes,
report on the diversity committee?
Yes. We had 2 telephone calls on the diversity committee, and we're trying to establish how to get better representation on all the different state boards on diversity and women. I have to report that California is under the best practices and that we've done a fantastic job. So what we're trying to focus on is how to educate and encourage other boards and other governors to appoint, and what's the process, and look at best practices and then try to reach out. We're having a call coming up next week on, we've decided to have kind of a list of different states that each one of the members of the diversity committee is going to contact and see how we can improve the process. So That's my report.
Great. Well, thank you. Any questions? Okay. And our next. Just, okay. We are going to, I think, go next to the Enforcement Program Oversight Committee, and Ms. Corrigan is going to give us a report there.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. We did meet today. Mr. Franzella provided information to us regarding matters involving unlicensed professionals. This was part of in response to our strategic plan for 2019-20, so it was very informative to receive that information. And also that staff are working to simplify the ability for individuals to report unlicensed activity to the board, for follow-up, that sort of thing. We agreed as a committee that the existing framework for unlicensed activity should continue as it is, that, we support the way that those matters are being addressed. And we discussed possible topics for future meetings. One of them that we are adding to the agenda is to look at issues, if there are any, that involve general licensees performing attest services. So we'll find out about that in a future meeting. And that is my report.
Thank you very much. Any questions from the members of the board? Okay. Well, the next item, we're going to skip to C, and we're going to get a report from the Legislative Committee, and Ms. Lopez, the chair, will take us through the next 2 or 3 pages of agenda items.
Yes, it is quite a few pages. Thank you. So for the Legislative Committee meeting, we met this morning at the start of the day. We opened with a written report for the CBA 2019 Legislative Tracking Chart. For item 12C3A, this was Assembly Bill 193, Professions and Vocations. Staff reported that this bill would require DCA to conduct a comprehensive review of all licensing requirements for each profession regulated by the DCA Board or Bureau, and to identify unnecessary licensing requirements. Staff noted that the bill also deletes certain licensing requirements related to the practice of barbering, cosmetology, and custom upholstery. AB 193 is a 2-year bill, and staff recommended maintaining a watch position. The LC committee did not take an action on this item. Next, Assembly Bill 312, State Government Administrative Regulations Review. This bill would require each state agency to review all of its regulations by January 1, 2022, and identify any regulations that are duplicative, overlapping, inconsistent, or out of date, and revise those identified regulations and report its findings and actions. The actions would be taken back to the legislator and the governor. Staff recommended to maintain a watch position, and the LC committee did not take action on this item. Next, for Assembly Bill 476, Department of Consumer Affairs Task Force. This is related to foreign trained professionals. This bill would require DCA to create a task force to study and issue a report regarding the licensing of professionals trained outside of the United States. The task force would be required to submit a report to the legislature by January 1, 2021 that identifies strategies to integrate foreign trained professionals, state and national licensing regulations that potentially pose unnecessary barriers to practice, and the best practices to integrate foreign trained professionals into the workforce of other states. Staff recommended we maintain a watch position. The LC did not take action on this item, but directed staff to research the provisions of the bill that related to non-U.S. accredited educational institutions and report back to the CBA. Next, Assembly Bill 613, Professions and Vocations, Regulatory Fees. This bill would authorize each board within DCA to increase no more than once every 4 years any fee authorized to be imposed by that board by an amount not to exceed the increase in the California Consumer Price Index for the preceding 4 years. Staff recommended we maintain a support position. The LC did not take an action on this item. Assembly Bill 802, reports to the legislature. This bill would require state and local agencies to submit reports electronically and not by printed copy to designated legislative officials. For reports involving data collection and analysis, the bill would require a state agency to post all data used to generate the report on the agency's internet website by the time the report is posted. Staff recommended that we maintain a watch position, and the LC did not take an action on this item. Next, we had Assembly Bill 931, Local Boards and Commission Representation Appointments. Staff stated that since the March 2019 CBA meeting, this bill was amended and now only requires the composition of appointed boards or commissions of a city with a population of 50,000 or greater. The LC recommended that the Legislative Committee recommends that the CBA discontinue its watch on this, discontinue its watch position on this Assembly bill. This is a fully formed motion and does not require a second. I will turn it back to the President for discussion and action. So the Legislative Committee is recommending that we discontinue watching this bill. Do we vote?
Yes.
Alicia Burhow. Yes. Jose Campos.
Yes.
Nancy Corrigan.
Yes.
George Familet.
Yes.
Mary Jiang.
Yes.
Carrie Ann Farrell-Hines.
Yes.
Dan Jacobson.
Yes.
Soshi Leon.
Yes.
Luz Molina Lopez.
Yes.
Corolla Nicholson.
Yes.
Deirdre Robinson.
Yes.
Katrina Salazar.
Yes.
Michael Savoy.
Yes.
And Mark Silverman.
Yes.
Okay, motion passes.
Thank you. Now I'm at item 12C3G. This is Assembly Bill 1140, Tax Preparers Disclosures. This bill would require a tax preparer registered with the California Tax Education Council to make specified written disclosures to their clients that include the total amount of all fees being charged by the tax preparer and a notice stating that taxpayers earning less than $66,000 each year would qualify for free in-person tax preparation. Staff recommended maintaining a support position, and the LC did not take any further action. Next, we had Assembly Bill 1521. This is our Accountancy CBA Sunset Review. Let's see. It was reported that since the March 2019 CBA meeting, the bill was amended to include provisions that do the following. They allow the CBA to electronically distribute their update newsletter, requires all applicants and licensees to provide a valid email address to the CBA. It allows the CBA to deny an applicant for initial licensure if that person was disciplined by the federal government, the Public Company Accounting Oversight Board, or another country for any act substantially related to the functions, qualifications, or duties of a CPA. This bill also deletes the term fiduciary from the statute added by previous bill, AB 2338, that requires the CBA to develop regulations that authorize the denial of an application for initial licensure if the applicant committed certain felony financial crimes, and also make a non-substantive amendment to the BPC section 51 or 5100.1. Discussion related to the CBA's fees was discussed under CBA item 3B, report of the Secretary Treasurer. Staff recommended that we maintain a support position, and the LC did not take any further action. Moving on, Assembly Bill 1525, Cannabis Financial Institutions. This bill states that a CPA or accounting firm does not commit a crime under California law solely for providing professional accounting services to persons licensed to engage in commercial cannabis activity. This is a 2-year bill. Staff recommended that we maintain a watch position, and the LC did not take any further action. Assembly Bill 1545 is the Civil Penalty Reduction Policy. This bill would require state agencies to assist a small business, as defined, in complying with all of the statutes and regulations administered by the state agency and in any enforcement action by the state agency. This bill would require a state agency to establish a policy that provides for the reduction of civil penalties for violations of regulatory or statutory requirements by a small business under appropriate circumstances. Staff recommended that we maintain a watch position, and the LC did not take any further action. Senate Bill 51, Financial Institutions Cannabis. This was another bill related to this matter. This bill would establish cannabis limited charter banks and cannabis limited charter credit unions to provide specific financial services to the cannabis industry. Staff recommended that we maintain a watch position. The Legislative Committee did not take action on this item, but directed staff to invite the author and sponsor of the bill to address the CBA in this and other related cannabis legislation, and to place on a future CBA meeting agenda a discussion of how the accounting profession is impacted by current cannabis-related federal laws. Next, we had Senate Bill 53, Open Meetings. This bill would subject two-member advisory committees to the requirements of the Bagley-Keene Open Meeting Act, which include publishing a 10-day meeting notice, an agenda, opening the meeting to the public, recording the meeting, and publishing minutes. Staff recommended the CBA maintain its opposed position on SB 53 and approve the following proposed amendments. Except from the bill, communications, discussions, and meetings between staff of the CBA, DCA, or elsewhere within the governor's administration, and a single member of a CBA or CBA committee. Exempt from the bill, peer review oversight committee administrative site visits associated with an entity that administers a peer review program to ensure the entity is operating in accordance with the standards adopted by the CBA, and continue to allow 2 CBA members or CBA committee members to participate in outreach events or discussions with the legislator. The LC recommends that the CBA approve the proposed amendments to Senate Bill 53. This is a fully formed motion and does not require a second. I will turn it back to President Familette for discussion and action.
Okay. So we need a motion or just go straight to a vote? Okay. We have a vote?
Mark Silverman,
Yes.
Michael Savoy,
Yes.
Katrina Salazar,
Yes.
Deirdre Robinson,
Yes.
Corolla Nicholson,
Yes.
Luz Molina Lopez,
Yes.
Soshi Leon,
Yes.
Dan Jacobson,
Yes.
Carrie Ann Farrell Hines,
Yes.
Mary Jiang,
Yes.
George Familette,
Yes.
Nancy Corrigan,
Yes.
Jose Campos,
Yes.
and Alicia Brown.
Yes.
Okay. Motion passes.
Thank you. I will
Ms.
continue. The next item, Senate Bill 601, is for state agencies' licenses fee waiver. This bill would authorize a state agency that issues any business license to reduce or waive any required fees for licensure, renewal of licensure, or the replacement of a physical license who was displaced by a declared emergency. Staff recommended that the LC maintain a support position. The LC did not take any further action on this item. Assembly Bill 1271, Licensing Examinations Report. Staff reported that this bill would require the DCA on or before January 1, 2021, to provide a report to the Assembly Committee on Business and Professions and the Senate Committee on Business Professions and Economic Development that contains specified information relating to the licensing examinations for each licensed profession and vocation under the department's jurisdiction. This is a spot bill and a 2-year bill. Staff recommended that we maintain a watch position, and the LC did not take any further action. Okay, Assembly Bill 63, State Government. This bill would require an agency that serves or furnishes information to the public or engages in activities that involve public contact to provide a plain language online form that allows the public to assign a letter grade, A, B, C, or F, A, B, C, D, or F, to rate their experience with that agency. Further, it requires that agencies provide the public the option to display their comment or grade publicly, among other public comments. The LC recommends that the CBA approve a watch position on Assembly Bill 931. This is a fully formed motion and does not require a second. I will turn it back to President Familette for discussion and action.
Okay. Questions? Okay, have a vote?
Alicia Burhell?
Yes.
Jose Campos?
Yes.
Nancy Corrigan?
Yes.
George Familet?
Yes.
Mary Jiang?
Yes.
Carrie Ann Farrell Hines?
Yes.
Dan Jacobson?
Yes.
Soshi Leon?
Yes.
Luz Molina Lopez?
Yes.
Corolla Nicholson?
Yes.
Deirdre Robinson?
Yes.
Katrina Salazar?
Yes.
Michael Savoy?
Yes.
And Mark Silverman?
Yes.
Ms. Lopez?
Great, thank you. I should have mentioned, now we have moved on to the section where these are bills that are now new to the Ledge Committee, and we took actions on all of these. Let's continue on with item 12C 4B. This is for Assembly Bill 535, Personal Income Tax Credit. This bill would allow certain taxpayers beginning January 1, 2020, to claim a credit against their state income taxes for the costs paid or incurred to obtain a qualified initial professional license as defined. This bill does not include a CPA license among the list of qualified professional licenses. The LC recommends that the CBA approve a watch position on Assembly Bill 535. This is a fully formed motion and does not require a second. Mr. President?
Okay, may I have a vote?
Mark Silverman?
Yes.
Michael Savoy? Katrina Salazar?
Yes.
Deirdre Robinson? Corolla Nicholson?
Yes.
Luz Molina Lopez?
Yes.
Soshi Leon?
Yes.
Dan Jacobson?
Yes.
Carrie Ann Farrell Hines?
Yes.
Mary Jiang?
Yes.
George Familet?
Yes.
Nancy Corrigan?
Yes.
Jose Campos?
Yes.
And Alicia Burhell?
Yes. Do you want to record your vote? Do you want to record your vote?
I was about to say yes, and you went right past me.
Very quicker.
So,
So is that a yes or no?
Yeah, what is your
I'm still going to say yes.
Okay. Good.
okay. Motion passes.
All right.
Ms. Lopez?
Next is item 12C4C. This is Assembly Bill 544, Professions and Vocations Inactive License Fees and Accrued and Unpaid Renewal Fees. This bill would limit the maximum fee for the renewal of a license in an inactive status to no more than 50% of the renewal fee for an active license. The bill would also prohibit a board or bureau from requiring payment of accrued and unpaid renewal fees as a condition of reinstating an expired license or registration. Staff noted that the bill would reduce the CBA's revenues by approximately $954,000 annually. The LC recommends that the CBA approve an opposed position on Assembly Bill 544. This is a fully formed motion and does not require a second. Mr. President?
Yes, may I have a vote?
All right,
Well,
Alicia.
can we, discussion, have we looked at, I mean, I understand, while I don't appreciate a blanket limitation on how we handle our fees, what they seem to be getting at is it's probably less of a burden on a regulatory agency to deal with an inactive license than an active license, is I think what they're trying to get at. And I'm not sure what the answer is. I mean, clearly an inactive person, that they would have less, no CE, right? So you wouldn't have CE to audit or have follow-ups. I'm not sure that the enforcement, which is the biggest part of our cost profile, would differ. Presumably these people aren't practicing and not doing things that a CPA is required to do, but we have many circumstances where we have to follow up on those things. My long-winded point is, I understand the opposed motion, but it seems worthy of trying to analyze this active versus inactive concept in the fee setting process, because we don't differentiate right now. And I know we're going to do some fee analysis, but that might be a worthwhile topic to take up. And I don't know that we mentioned that in our opposed letter. Give some credit to that. There might be a difference, but that's not a determinable amount at this point. So anyways, that was my 2 cents on it.
I think that could be easily added into the opposed letter.
Yeah.
Address that concern.
The dilemma is that if we find that there is a differential, then presumably we would differentiate on fee levels, right? And so I think our oppose needs to be not so focused on, hey, we're going to lose close to $1 million of fees, but rather there is a burden on this board on dealing with inactive licensees that isn't terribly different than an active license.
Actually, my point on the oppose was not, it was opposing somebody else determining how much and when to reduce the license versus we determine that.
Right.
That was my concern.
And why 50% is the right number, right? I mean, that seems very steep in terms of a limitation.
I'm trying to find the code section, but the reason that you guys charge the full fee currently for inactive license is because the B&P code requires it. The Business and Professions Code. I'm just trying to find the code section. So you're already having someone tell you how much your fees can be. So let me just verify, but I don't want you guys to move on without me verifying and giving you this information. If that's part of the reason is that you're concerned that the legislature wants to say, okay, an inactive is only worth this much to you, but an active one is worth this much to you. The reason that you're, I think, currently charging the full price for inactive is because it's required by law.
Does that differ from that delinquent renewal fee? I know we had one that was already limited to.
Required by law to be 50% of.
That's, okay.
So I'm just trying, I know it's in here somewhere. I just don't remember off the top of my head where it is.
It's a big book. I have a quick question. How long can we renew, I should know this, inactive? Or is there a limit?
Keep it that way.
Presently, there's no time limit on how long you can stay in an inactive status.
And after you change your mind of going from inactive to active, you just have to complete the regular CPE requirements?
Yes. In order to
Reinstated?
Yeah.
So it's just regular, so it's just regular 80 hours, so you could be inactive for 8 years and then decide, oh, okay, I want to be active again, and then just do 80 hours and be done? Okay.
Wow.
I mean, the practical side is a lot of people go into private industry, right? And they sort of go inactive, then they'll sometimes come back out to public or go into a job where chief accountant or something where they sort of want you to be active. So there's depends on your job and responsibilities. You see some people jumping in and out of that over a period of years through job changes.
And I don't know that the code thing's going to be a determinant factor on the concept. I think we just wanted to make sure we looked at this in the fee analysis part. So maybe we agree. But we can move on probably.
Yes.
Okay.
So we
Well, let's have a vote.
But we can't direct staff to add in Mr. Campos's comments. Okay.
Vote.
Alicia Burhow?
Yes.
Jose Campos?
Yes.
Nancy Corrigan?
Yes.
George Family?
Yes.
Mary Jiang?
Yes.
Carrie Ann Farrell-Hines?
Yes.
Dan Jacobson?
Yes.
Soshi Leon?
Yes.
Luz Molina Lopez?
Yes.
Corolla Nicholson?
Yes.
Deirdre Robinson?
Yes.
Katrina Salazar?
Yes.
Michael
Yes.
Savoy? And Mark Silverman?
Motion passes. Ms. Lopez.
Thank you. Now we're on item 12C4D. This is regarding Assembly Bill 1076, Criminal Records Automatic Relief. This bill would require the Department of Justice, or DOJ, to review its criminal justice databases and seal the arrest records or dismiss certain convictions of individuals that qualify under the bill. With limited exceptions, the bill prohibits DOJ from disclosing to other parties information concerning an arrest that has been sealed or a dismissed conviction. The LC recommends that the CBA approve a watch position on Assembly Bill 1076. This is a fully formed motion, does not require a second. Mr. President.
Okay. Have a vote.
Mark Silverman?
Yes.
Michael Savoy?
Yes.
Katrina Salazar?
Yes.
Deirdre Robinson?
Yes.
Corolla Nicholson?
Yes.
Luz Molina Lopez?
Yes.
Soshi Leon?
Yes.
Dan Jacobson?
Yes.
Carrie Ann Farrell-Hines?
Yes.
Mary Jiang?
Yes.
George Family?
Yes.
Nancy Corrigan?
Yes.
Jose Campos?
Yes.
And Alicia Burhow?
Yes.
Okay.
Motion passes. Ms. Lopez?
Next and last, I think, this is Assembly Bill 1181, Charitable Organizations. This bill requires financial records of certain solicitations for charitable purposes to be maintained according to specific accounting standards, apart from generally accepted accounting principles, or GAAP. It further prohibits a charitable organization from reporting its non-cash contributions in a way that is misleading or likely to cause confusion, and removes the American Institute of CPAs and the Financial Accounting Standards Board from the list of organizations involved in the establishment of GAAP for purposes of these valuations. The LC recommends that the CBA approve an opposed position on Assembly Bill 1181. This is a fully formed motion and does not require a second. Mr. President.
I'm sorry, Mr. President. I think the removal was the AICP and the GASB, not the FASB.
GASB, yeah.
Could be correct.
Government Accounting Standards Board, not the Financial Accounting Standards Board.
Okay, we'll correct that.
Yeah, and I think the committee also said we wanted to CBA to also write a letter, our own separate letter in opposition of it.
Yes.
Yeah, and I've listened intently to the discussion on that and agreed with the reasons. But again, in our opposition letter, making it more specific to CBA-driven factors would be good. Like, for example, when we subject our licensees to peer review requirements, and that is application of nationally recognized accounting standards in the work that they're doing. And so it is not natural for a licensee to go look at state law to figure out what the accounting requirements under GAAP would be. And so you could put our licensee population at risk of failing, or not implementing the totality correctly, right? And so the peer review could be an additional discussion point in how we think about this. There might be some continuing education type of, we already have all these A&A type of requirements, right, for GAO, and there are definitely going to be nonprofits that are going to have charitable activities that might be GASB reporting entities, and so you might have GAO type, CE requirements in there. So those might be some pieces that make it a little more directly in the line of regulatory oversight that we have.
Okay, any other comments before we vote? Okay, let's have a vote.
All right, Alicia Burhow,
Yes.
Jose Campos,
Yes.
Nancy Corrigan,
Yes.
George Family,
Yes.
Mary Jion,
Yes.
Carrie Ann Farrell Hines.
Yes.
Dan Jacobson,
Yes.
Soshi Leon,
Yes.
Ruth Molina Lopez,
Yes.
Corolla Nicholson,
Yes.
Deirdre Robinson,
Yes.
Katrina Salazar,
Yes.
Michael Savoy,
Yes.
and Mark Silverman.
Okay, motion passes. Ms.
Great,
Lopez?
and my last item, this is item 12C5A through K. A review and possible consideration of positions on legislation the CBA is monitoring. Staff reported that items A through K are bills being monitored by staff and include spot bills and bills related to the cannabis industry. The LC did not take action on these items, and that concludes my report.
Thank you very much, Ms. Lopez.
Mr. President, may I just make a comment if I could, please?
Proceed.
Relative to listen to report. I think, I'm not on the committee, but I did listen intently. As to SB 51, the cannabis bank issue, which I think originally was John Chung's idea when he was treasurer, and now is sponsored by Fiona Ma, who's our wonderful treasurer and also a CPA. I think in the report there may have been mentioned that we would just invite the author of the legislation, Senator Hertzberg, and I think that during the discussion, it was to invite both of them.
Right.
She said author and sponsor.
Yes, we said both.
She said both.
Yes.
Well, now I've said it twice.
Okay. You reiterated it.
Yes.
Well done.
Along those lines, AB 476, which says that basically you don't get in trouble if you're with the state authorities if you're working on a cannabis issue. Maybe we can just tie that in when they're here or after they're here and discuss that issue also. Just very quickly, there was the courts don't seem to have, the state courts don't seem to have too much trouble with distinguishing between the federal law and the state law when it comes to the cannabis issues. The most illustrative case that I can think of is a case out of Garden Grove where this was before recreational cannabis was allowed, but during the medicinal period, the police pulled someone over and confiscated marijuana, and then he had a card, a prescription or whatever you call those things, and he was not charged, or his case was dismissed, but he sued to get his cannabis back, and the Division 3 of the 4th District Court of Appeal said that's right, it's his. Garden Grove police are state officers, and they have no right to take it. Now, if it were an FBI agent, it might.
Right now, I just don't. Can we just maybe leave that for when we have the broader cannabis discussion?
I'm just saying. My only point is that the courts have not had a problem. The state courts have not had a problem with saying what is state law and what is federal law, and what applies to state officers and what applies to federal officers.
Okay. I just wanted to add, it was actually, we were talking about having them come and talk about it in the broader context of the implications of our licensees representing clients who are operating in the cannabis industry, and the impact that the differences in the laws may have upon them, and how it affects other areas that the board oversees. And so that's why we were asking them to come, not just to the legislative committee to talk about that one bill in particular, and the bill that you're referring to is actually AB 1525. That's the other bill that we considered, but to talk about things like how does it impact professional conduct, how does it impact, how should we be advising our licensees about ethical responsibility in representing clients, how do we make sure that we're educating the cannabis industry business owners who are engaging the services of CPAs, what are the obligations of CBAs to them. So that was the context in which we were talking about it, and having them come to speak to the larger board about it.
Okay.
I have one question, and that's in the purple document on page 3, there's a mention that a new, more focused complaint form is being developed and will be electronically available on our website. Will there be a paper alternative? I'm concerned about low-income people who may not have access to the internet.
Yeah, any of our information on the website, if someone requested to receive that in a paper form, we would provide that.
Thank you.
Okay, well, we will stay with Mr. Jacobson. We're going to go to 12B and get the report on the Committee on Professional Conduct.
Thank you. So the Committee on Professional Conduct, we had a discussion about possible action regarding the possibility of allowing California candidates to take the uniform CPA examination prior to degree conferral. Staff explained that the current process for individuals to apply to sit for the CPA exam may limit a recent graduate's ability to sit for the CPA exam during the summer months before beginning employment or internship to obtain experience for a CPA license. Staff noted that there are 3 states, Washington, Nebraska, and Missouri, and they do allow candidates under certain guidelines to take the CPA exam prior to degree conferral. Staff stated that allowing candidates to test prior to degree conferral would require the implementation of a tracking system of some sort and would require a change to Business and Professions Code Section 5093. If the board would like to move forward pursuing a statutory change to allow the CPA exam candidates to sit for the CPA exam prior to degree conferral, staff recommended that this be developed during the CBA's business modernization project, which will be launched in July of 2019. Finally, staff suggested that the CBA direct staff to explore allowing electronic submission of transcripts for recent graduates to place on a future and put that on a future CBA agenda for consideration. The committee discussed the value of allowing candidates to sit for the CPA exam in the months following completion of their degree requirements, but before the official degree is conferred. The committee members also discussed potential risks in taking this approach and agreed that a potential risk is minimal as candidates may not receive a license without obtaining a bachelor's degree. So the committee members inquired as to the cost to the CBA staff for tracking applicant data, as this would be a manual endeavor. They'd have to do it manually. And the staff responded that the cost would be minimal. The committee recommends that the CBA direct staff to partner with universities with high volume of graduates who applying for with high volumes of graduates applying for the CPA exam to expedite the process to receive degree conferral documentation. That is the motion, and it is fully formed.
Call for a vote.
Mark Silverman,
Yes.
Katrina Salazar,
Yes.
Deirdre Robinson,
Yes.
Corolla Nicholson,
Yes.
Luz Molina Lopez,
Yes.
Soshi Leon,
Yes.
Dan Jacobson,
Yes.
Carrie Ann Farrell Hines.
Yes.
Mary Jiang,
Yes.
George Pamela,
Yes.
Nancy Corrigan,
Yes.
Jose Campos,
Yes.
and Alicia Burhow.
Yes.
Motion passes.
The committee has another motion, and that is as follows. We recommend that the CBA direct staff to pursue legislative changes to allow candidates to sit for the CPA exam before degree conferral and incorporate that within the business modernization project, a process to track individuals who may apply for the CPA exam prior to degree conferral. This is after they've completed their units, but before they've gotten the degree. So that is a motion, and it's fully formed.
Is that, I'm not sure that's what we approved as a committee. I did not think it was sort of someone that was working their way towards it and they were going to achieve that, versus you're saying once they've completed all their units, that's what your takeaway was?
I understood it perhaps incorrectly.
I understood it that way also, but I invite.
I did not.
I didn't, I just assumed that they were going to have substantially completed their degree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And were enrolled in that last semester. So like, for example, when I stepped back and I understood
90 to 180
Washington's
days.
requirement was 180 days, and I assumed that meant, all right, this is somebody that's about to enroll in their last semester, or that's the window that they're giving, and all indications are they're going to meet their units in that remaining semester, is how I interpreted that. But I didn't go back to every last word in that Washington reg to read it that way.
That's what I heard too.
Yes.
Yeah.
My
misunderstanding.
Yeah, it was somewhere between, 90 to 100 days, 180 days before they graduated so that they could take the exam because they're just about to finish up.
Right.
So
That was my.
the motion still indicates before degree conferral.
Yes.
I don't know if the motion says once all the units are completed. If that's what the motion says, then I would not be in agreement with that motion.
No,
But if it's a little more open, then I think the motion still stands, and staff can figure out the pieces on that.
As I stated, it said once all are completed. That's not what's written here. That comes from my memory. So why don't to ease this, let me take out those words and say that the motion is before degree conferral.
Okay.
I think that would work.
Let's have a vote.
Well, there were more questions?
No, that's all I needed to, because I wanted to make sure that was cleared up. So that was my
I don't know, we got any comments from the public?
Question.
Mr. President?
So this motion is to direct staff to work on this and bring something back in that 90 to 180 day range, is that correct?
Yes,
for
because
another
anything's
vote.
going to require regulatory,
It is, yeah. Got it, okay.
legislative,
So
we said,
Yes.
changes, I mean,
Got it.
so.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify.
Okay.
Alicia Burhow,
Yes.
Jose Campos,
Yes.
Nancy Corrigan,
Yes.
George Family,
Yes.
Mary Jiang,
Yes.
Carrie Ann Farrell Hines.
Yes.
Dan Jacobson,
Yes.
Saoirse Leon,
Yes.
Luz Molina Lopez,
Yes.
Corolla Nicholson,
Yes.
Deirdre Robinson,
Yes.
Katrina Salazar,
Yes.
and Mark Silverman.
Yes.
Motion passes. Okay.
And lastly, we had a discussion on and thought of possible action regarding continuing professional education reciprocity. Staff stated that at the March 2019 CBA meeting, staff was asked to conduct additional research to help the CBA determine whether to pursue continuing education reciprocity. Staff noted that approximately 10% of the CBA's licensee population has an out-of-state address, which provides a starting point to understand the number of licensees that may benefit from continuing education reciprocity. Staff stated that differing renewal cycles did not appear to have any impact on a state's continuing education reciprocity policies. Further, staff learned that the state of North Carolina requires completion of an ethics course that deviates from the model rules. Staff suggested that if the CBA desires to pursue continuing education reciprocity, it can use the Uniform Accounting Act Model Rule 6-7 language as a starting point and adjust the language to incorporate flexibility for differing renewal cycle timeframes, require the completion of any California-specific courses or other requirements that the CBA would deem appropriate. But the committee discussed the differing continuing education requirements of other states as compared to California, and stated that staff should conduct further research to consider the state's various continuing education requirements before we take any action. And that concludes my report.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Jacobson. Any other comments, questions? We are going to next go to item 13, closing business. Any comments from the public? Okay. Any agenda items for future Board of Accountancy meetings, board members?
I do have one,
Okay.
Mr. President. I think we went extensively through the Ledge Committee about adding, making a provision to be able to discuss cannabis, and I would like to see that as an agenda item in future meetings.
Okay. Thank you. Yes.
I would request that maybe at a future meeting to be determined by the president, we reevaluate credit card fees as just part of the earlier conversation. So maybe this year, maybe next, but that be put on the radar screen.
Okay. Thank you. Any other input? Any input from the public? Okay. We are going to go into closed session. Thank you very much.